Okay, I think we're live. Or not live, but we're recording.
We're recording.
All right, what's up, y'all? This is Alami Bashir, aka Mama Lami. I'm your transformational life coach, and this is Be Great Every Day, where we engage in real talk and true stories about everyday problems. And you guys might be happy to see that I'm not alone today. I said I did not want to be a talking head, in that I don't want this to be a platform that is just, me talking at you, but more so a place and space where you can hear not just my perspective, but other people's perspective and how they cope with everyday challenges or how they help others cope with everyday challenges. So today, we have the lovely honor of welcoming in Dr. Tameka Jackson as we engage in a conversation about something that's pretty serious. This week's topic is very sobering in many ways, in that so many people that I know and love and connect with experience this. And even myself, I have my own story of navigating depression. So today I would like to talk about that. What it's like to live with chronic depression or chronic bouts of sadness, and how that impacts everyday living and function, and the pursuit of joy and like your best life, right? So, of course, I'm well-versed in this area, not just personally, but also professionally. As you guys know, I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I could talk about this all day. However, I thought it was apropos to bring in another voice, someone who works in psychotherapy day in and day out. While that is my background, I decided to use my platform to transition into coaching. And so today I would like to talk about not just, what is depression, what are the signs and symptoms, but I would really like to tackle and help you all understand some of the differences in treatment. As of course, everybody knows that you can go and see a therapist for treatment, but you may or may not know that a life coach is also well-versed in that area, and that the role and function that each professional plays looks a little bit different. And so you might be curious to know what some of those differences are, and then you can decide, which format sounds like the best option for you given what you might be experiencing, or maybe even those around you. So I just kind of want to set the stage a little bit, Tameka, and I will call her informally Tameka. She's not very pretentious, which we love that. I forced her to put doctor in front of her name on this call. So,
true story.
And for those of you who are listening on any of my podcast platforms, this telecast is available on YouTube as well. If you would like to physically see us, you can go to Be Great Every Day, my channel on YouTube, to check that out. So without further ado, I'd like to again more formally welcome Dr. Tameka Jackson.
Thank you so much, Alami, for inviting me to this platform. And just thank you for saying yes to this platform. I have had the opportunity to listen to a few of the episodes, and already myself personally helped, and I'm just in such expectancy for what's to come. So I love that you are following the nudge of your spirit, and that all of us are able to benefit. And so for me personally, yes, I'm trained as a psychologist, but it really does just feel like my life's calling to create space for people, to heal, to remind people of their light. And so anytime I'm able to speak beyond just the one-to-one and invite it to a larger platform, I want to courageously say yes, and to trust that this is a gift that God has given me and I want to share it. So thank you for allowing me to be able to share whatever it is that comes forth from this episode on your podcast.
Absolutely. And anybody who follows me on any of these platforms that I'm using now, or any of my previous ones, if you listen to any of my previous virtual office hours, you all have known that I live according to purpose. And there's no mistake in that I chose Dr. Jackson to join us today, because not only do I walk in purpose, but I like to really circle myself around other people that do the same. And so I'm really honored to have you here, Tameka. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about your background and kind of your day-to-day of what you do now, and anything else relevant to your profession that you think is important for people to know about you.
Yeah, for sure. So I usually start with where I'm from, because I have major pride for the East Coast. I'm originally from New Jersey, Hackensack to be specific. Born and raised there. I've been in California for 11 years now. And that's the longest I've lived anywhere outside of my hometown.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm getting ready to, I guess eventually I'll be here longer than I've been home. So I've been out here for 11 years, came here to do my postdoctoral training, and California just has a way of holding you. And this wasn't the plan, you know, but I've also learned that the plan is just, the plan is not mine, right? So I'm here because this is where I'm supposed to be. So day to day, I work as a psychologist. I'm in private practice. And, you know, since COVID has happened, I went from seeing about, you know, comfortably seeing about 15 clients a week to now closer to 30, 25 to 30
Oh my
clients
gosh.
a week.
Oh my gosh.
So, and that's everything from, there's more need. I mean, I have more flexibility with doing work from home, but I'm holding a lot of space for folks.
Sure.
And so, but I'm really honored to be able to, that even though COVID has happened, that I still am able to use telehealth, you know, as a way to still connect and be able to hold space for people.
Yeah.
So as far as outside of my work as a psychologist, I'm a deeply spiritual person. You know, like you said, Alami, you're one that moves with purpose. And for me, that is really resonates. That's how I move through the world, with intent and purpose, making sure that I'm moving in alignment. Things have to feel right in my core for me to be able to, and I haven't always been there, right? You know, my past was one of checking off the check boxes, you know, and doing what looks right, and the shoulds, but sometimes feeling very dissatisfied with whatever state I was in my life at the time. And so I've learned how to move from a place of that feels really true and right for me, that feels informed by my spirit and not just my head, and not other people's perception. And so in my work with clients, that's also the place that I'm trying to move them as well. How do I get you to connect to your core, to who you actually are and what it is that you want to bring forth, right? So that's a little bit about who I am, what I do, and why I do it.
Love, 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 and love. Check. Yeah, because that's what it's about, you know, that's what it's about. And as you speak about that being part of your purpose, to help other people realize that within themselves. And you use the word core, and I know core is an acronym that you use to describe your practice, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So in addition to my private practice, I've recently launching a new platform called Core Love. Core Love stands for Cultivating Our Real Essence. And it's a site that is specific for Black women in the cultivation of radical self-love and living with authenticity and celebrating the essence of who we are. And this is something that I've had, you know, you have these little seeds that get planted, and, you know, because of timing or fear, you just sort of keep them there, but there's that nudging. So it's been there for years. And I feel like just recently, I just felt like I don't know the full plan, the full scope of what it's going to manifest into. But God, I'm saying yes. And so, you know, so far I have a YouTube. You can follow me at core love, core_love on Instagram. And I want that to be a platform where I'm putting out encouraging videos, encouraging messages to just help us to anchor into our core. And I'll just quickly tell you where that name came from.
Yeah.
So I was watching one of my favorite spiritual teachers, T.D. Jakes, and he was doing a course with Oprah, one of the mastermind classes.
Mm-hmm.
And he held up an apple and he said, "What is this?" You know, the audience is like, "It's an apple, obviously," right? And he said, "What if I told you that this is an orchard?" And I just paused because I knew exactly where he was going, right?
Going with that. Yeah. Love it. Girls,
and so he said a lot of us, he said a lot of us just see ourselves as the apple and that's it. And there's been so many things that have been placed on top of us from family, from society, from our own heads, the peeling and the flesh of the apple that keep us from getting to the core. But when we cut to the core and we find those seeds of promise, those seeds of possibility, those seeds that will take this apple and transform it into an orchard, right? The possibilities become endless. And so my hope is to help Black women in particular to be able to learn, how do we dip down into the core? Because it's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And what is it that we need? So helping people look at, you know, what are the elements that we need in order to take these seeds? Because you can just have the seed, but like I said, if you're not doing anything with it, it's just going to stay a seed. So helping people figure out, you know, what's the dirt that I need? What's the foundational beliefs that I need to have? How do I nurture that? Right? Where am I drawing my light from? How do I water it?
Where am I drawing my light from? Lord,
how to cultivate that? So I'm excited to see where it's going to go. And just trusting that it is in divine order that this is coming forward now, because I also feel like there's a movement, you know, in light of all of the negativity and toxicity that we're seeing in the world. Those of us who know bigger than this moment are rising up and are ready to just really embark on these divine gifts that are ours. So I'm excited to be part of this movement that is happening, that we're all a part of right now.
I love that you say, you know, who know that there's something bigger, those of us who know that there's something bigger. And I think that's a good segue into our topic for the day, right? Because when we think about depression and its impact on people in general, of course, everybody is unique and has a unique experience. But when we think about depression at large, I think it's just that. It's the opposite of that. It's the needing to remember that there's something bigger, you know. So much of depression and depressive thinking is really confined to the moment, right? I feel terrible now. Things look bad now, you know, like it's a belaboring of what's happening or what has happened already, right? What has happened. And so don't let me get too far deep. Let's go back to the beginning for a second. And maybe you can share with people, like, what are we talking about? Like, how would you define depression? What are some of the common signs, symptoms? How can people recognize what this thing is that we're talking about before we proceed?
So I want to say it's important to note the difference between depression and sadness. You know, I think that we often use depression just in very casual terms. I'm feeling depressed. I'm just so depressed. And not to invalidate that feeling of stuckness or sadness or the blues, however you want to call it. There's a difference when we talk about clinical depression. So I want to talk about what depression is typically, you know, so as a psychologist, we use this statistical manual to define mental health challenges. But then I also want to talk about other ways that it shows up, because everything, you know, those are very westernized perspectives. And so I also want to be able to talk about other ways that depression might show up that might not fit in those classic boxes.
And we're talking about feelings on a spectrum, as you said, that you started with, you know, sadness, which can be a really normal part of the human experience, right? Everything is not always joyful or hunky-dory. Like, some things bum us out. That's a normal feeling, but how do we know once it starts to lean into more of something that's more intense, more clinical in nature? More pervasive. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So, so typically we're talking about, you know, like I said, not just a bad day, but this is something that you're feeling nearly every day for at least 2 weeks. at least 2 weeks, nearly every day for most of the day. So there's two things, first of all, that we want to look for. And so one would be just having a depressed mood, which is the feelings of sadness, feeling really low, or a loss of interest in things that previously gave you pleasure.
Yeah.
So I used to, love going out with my girlfriends, all of a sudden I'm finding that's not really giving me joy anymore. Or I'm an artist. All of a sudden I feel like painting is just not doing it for me. Whatever it was that used to bring you joy, you just don't even have an interest. So either having a depressed mood nearly every day or having a loss of interest in something nearly every day, one of those has to be present. And then the other things we'd be thinking about would be feelings of helplessness, right? Feeling just that I don't believe that I have the power to do anything about my situation. I feel like life is just happening to me. We hear people say, I just feel like a victim. I feel like everything's against me and there's nothing I can do to get myself out of it. Related to that helplessness would be a sense of hopelessness, just believing that this is just what it is. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to change, right? And that hopelessness and that helplessness can lead to thoughts of suicide, right? Which is another symptom, having suicidal thoughts. So, and that's also on a spectrum, right? Sometimes I'm having suicidal thoughts where I've actually contemplated, this is what I'm going to do because I can't take this anymore. And other times it might just sound like, I just wish I wasn't even here.
Yeah.
Wish I wouldn't wake up. So there's passive suicidal thoughts and then there are more active suicidal thoughts. Yes. Which can be such a dark place. And there can be so much shame. And that's one that we often don't share with other people. That just might be some private feelings that we're wrestling with. I think other things are looking at a change in our sleep patterns. So, sleep is critical to our mental health, but oftentimes when we're feeling depressed, we're either feeling insomnia. So I'm having trouble falling asleep. I'm just watching the hours just go. Okay, now it's 10 o'clock. Now it's 11 o'clock. Oh, it's 1 a.m. I just can't get to sleep. Or I fall asleep, no problem, but I'm waking up every couple of hours. Right? Or on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, hypersomnia. So I'm sleeping all the time.
All the time.
I can't pull myself out of the bed. Right? Looking at our appetite. And again, this is one that goes in extremes as well. It might be that I'm noticing that I'm just having trouble regulating control and I'm eating everything, right? And usually things that aren't healthy for me. So I'm also with that, I'm looking at excessive weight gain, or I just don't have an appetite. I can't eat and I'm starting to see excessive weight loss. It also manifests as being really irritable or angry, right? And so I think this we often see with certain cultural groups, right? Or that may not have had permission to feel sad or feel down, right? So maybe instead it's safer to express anger, and that can sometimes be missed as a symptom. So I'm just feeling anger all the time. I'm snapping at people. I'm being short with people. Then a loss of energy, right? Just everything just feels like it's slow. I tell clients sometimes it's like, when you're try to run in water. And you just feel like I'm moving, but I'm not getting anywhere and everything's feeling harder. It's that kind of thing. And it's, even just getting out of the bed or going to take a shower feels like someone's asking you to run a mile. So you're just noticing that my energy is just off physically and then also mentally, right? You're finding that I'm having difficulty focusing. I'm having difficulty concentrating. I can't remember things. I'm forgetful.
Staying on task.
Staying on task, and then finally just feeling really worthless, just feeling like I don't matter, or having excessive feelings of guilt that don't necessarily fit the bill. So just really feeling weighed down by that. So those are some of those classic symptoms. And so when we're talking about getting a depression diagnosis, we're saying you have at least 5 of those symptoms that are happening for at least a 2-week period or more. That's what it would look like.
I know there's probably folks listening to this that are like, check. Yep, that's me. Yep, check. Yep, that's me too. Yep, check, check, check. That's me too. Maybe not that one, but yep, check, 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 check. That was, And even as you're speaking, it's like giving me flashbacks to different times in my life where I've felt really down. And there was a time, I've talked about this before, where I had an early life crisis. where the person I was married to at the time told me they didn't want to be married anymore. I was planning to play professional basketball, and I'd broken my leg, and I'd graduated college, and all this happened within like 3 days of each other. Okay. So I graduated college, had no job. My plan was to become a professional basketball player. So it's like, I literally had no sense of identity. I was no longer a wife or a student. I had no job prospect, and like no answer to what was going to happen next in my life. So when you talk about feeling hopeless and helpless, that definitely is where I was at. And I was having suicidal thoughts as a result of it. Praise God, I wasn't in a place to actually be proactive about those thoughts, but I was definitely in a mindset of, man, it'd be so much better if I wasn't here, if I didn't have to deal with this. And I'll tell the story in more detail later, but that was really a pivotal time for me that allowed me to, one, recognize that I needed help. You know, I was strong enough to recognize this is not right, you know. And when I say I'd broken my leg and I was bedbound. So I had nowhere to run even physically, like literally. So I was just stuck in my own head, and I was having these crazy thoughts, and I'm like, I gotta get help. So I told my mom. She hooked me up with a therapist, and it was literally, that was the pivotal time in my life where I found my own calling. You know, all the things that mattered most to me were stripped away within minutes of each other, and brought me to my knees. And then I started seeing a therapist, and it was during those exchanges that I discovered that that was the kind of work that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a helper of other people like this. And that led me to go to grad school, which was never on my list of things to do. And, you know, the rest is history, as now I'm, you know, working full time as a life coach and serving people in much the same way. So I love to tell my own personal story, because I know people look at me and they have certain perceptions of, oh, she looks like she's got it all together, but they don't know I got it out the mud, you know? So for me, it's important to normalize these feelings, because it's not like, you know, just people who, you know, we can contextualize, you know, people who go through grief or some like really traumatic episode, like why they would become sad. But like life sometimes just beats you down.
It's just hard. Yeah.
It's just hard sometimes. And as you said, your clientele has doubled since COVID. I mean, it's obviously no wonder why, because on top of life's regular challenges, it's all doubled down with, you know, the uncertainties of our health, our climate, our, you know, environment, our political, like everything is questionable, right?
It's all weird. Yeah.
I really love that you started with talking about sadness, because I think so many of us, and like you said, misuse the word depression, like, oh, I'm depressed, like, oh, you're just kind of bummed out. And not to minimize those feelings, but to just kind of, to give it broader perspective. It's normal, natural, and sometimes even healthy to have down moments, you know, because in those moments, it helps to give us more perspective. And oftentimes it helps to jumpstart our inner motivation to do something about whatever is causing that feeling at the time.
Absolutely.
But I think what you're saying is that when you're not able to kind of switch the gear and shift into another gear with it, and it becomes pervasive for a couple of weeks and coupled with a lot of others, you know, common symptomology, then that might be a telltale sign, right?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that part of your story, Alami.
Yeah.
As you were saying it, I just found myself, I don't know, just breathe. And when you said it was within 3 days of each other, right? It was just so sobering. And that you talk about just that loss of identity. You know, oftentimes we define ourselves by the roles that we occupy, you know, whether that be wife, parent, whatever you do for a living. And when that is, for whatever reason, stripped away, it's scary as hell. Yeah. Right? Who am I now? Yeah. Who am I now?
I had no answers. But none.
Yeah. Right.
No
and you know, if we're left sometimes by ourselves in those moments, yes, it's only natural we're going to go to a dark place. And I think it speaks to why we need to stay in connection with one another. So for you, it was reaching out to your mom, and your mom saying, okay, I'm going to find a therapist, and that therapist being able to come in and just bear witness with you through the pain, not take it away, but just to be a witness to all the grief that you
Yeah.
were holding, and to be, and to know now, looking back, to know that in the moment, what felt like the
Yeah.
worst moment, right?
Yeah.
That was part of that fertilizer that is,
Yep.
has helped
Yep.
you to grow to this woman that you are today. And, you know, one of the
Yep.
things I like that you say is you look for the lesson and the blessing
Yeah.
in moments of tragedy.
Yeah.
And so, and sometimes we can't see it in the moment. It's
Sure.
nearly impossible, you know, but when you
Mhm.
look back, that perspective that it offers is like, wow, had this thing not happened.
Literally. I mean, had it not, for me in particular, had that situation, those situations not happened and not happened in the sequencing in which they did, at the timing in which they did, it was the most tragic thing that ever happened to me at that time. Right? And that's a whole other story, but it really felt like the worst thing ever. And in retrospect, it was absolutely one of the best things to ever happen to me. And like hands down, unequivocally.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but like you say, in the moment, sometimes it's hard to reach for that. Right.
Right. Right. And that's where we
So,
need people that can hold that hope for us. So whether that be with a
yes.
life coach, whether that be with a therapist, with a
Yeah.
trusted friend, right? But someone that can just hold that hope for you, with you, even when
Yeah.
you are not able to see that light for yourself.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. So I think it's a good time, as you were and I thank you for breaking all that down in terms of really giving people a clear profile of some of the symptoms that they could look out for if they might be experiencing bouts of sadness and not really understanding what's going on with me, or am I really depressed? You know, like, and not that, I'll talk about this later. To me, you heard me say this the other day, is that I really, as a coach, I work with clients who are depressed as well. I'm not looking for necessarily this. I'm not bound to the DSM. The DSM, for those of you who don't know, is the manual that psychologists and psychiatrists, right, use to
Yep.
Evaluate or define illness, mental illness, or disorders, I guess is more appropriate. So I don't use the DSM when I'm evaluating clients for appropriateness to coaching. And here might be a good time to insert what the difference is between counseling and coaching. And you jump in wherever
Sure.
I feel like I might be devoid here. But I mentioned earlier that I have a background in therapy. And I say that not to toot my own horn, but to give people a broader perspective of the perspectives that I come with. Because I was trained to be a therapist, which means that I was trained to kind of look at things according to DSM diagnosis. And with that, well, let me slow down. Difference between counseling and coaching. There's many, but in general, counseling and psychotherapy, it's more process oriented. Yes, you might be shooting for particular outcomes, but you're really more dialed into the process of the experience, helping people unfold experiences, helping people understand things that have happened to them, helping them to heal old wounds that may have a pervasive impact on their life today. It's more about process. When we work with clients in a coaching dynamic, it's more about outcomes. So while we may be concerned about how you got to where you are right now, we're less concerned about that and more focused on how do we get you from where you are right now to where you want to go in the future or tomorrow, right? How do we get you from here to there? And so it's more outcome based. Counseling is more process oriented. Coaching is more outcome based. Would you agree with that?
I would. I would. You know, I think there are still the benefits of that outcome based that can happen in counseling. But yeah, I think initially a lot of it is kind of going back to understand, how did you get here now?
That's right.
Right. And if you're here long enough, we may be able to move forward, but it starts sort of looking back. Right. Whereas the coaching, like you said, is meeting you here and developing the action steps.
And for me, it's like I have clients that I have refused to see and that I will refer to therapy because they're not ready for coaching. Like you can't start to build forward on a faulty foundation. If you've never addressed the degree of trauma and stress and strife that you've experienced in your life, it doesn't matter what behavioral tactics or techniques that I start teaching, you got to go back and heal some stuff first. You need to process it. You need to process it. You need to unpack it. You need to look stuff in the eye that you've been running from, or, you know, better
Absolutely.
understand experiences that you've had before you can really start to move forward behaviorally, or even with your mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to be able to look inside Pandora's box first before you can move forward in healing or with shifting anything behaviorally in your life. That's my take.
Absolutely.
So I have clients who will see me alongside a therapist at the same time. That's common. I've had therapists refer clients to me for coaching because they're doing their process-oriented work, but they need to get clarity around what they're doing in their life. Like, they understand why they're depressed, they're learning how to treat the symptoms of it. But now, because the depression was triggered by a divorce or, you know, the loss of some part of their identity, because it was triggered by some particular situation that now they need to rebuild from, that's where coaching comes in to kind of pick up that rein and start to help them clarify or establish sometimes a brand new vision for their life and start to take, you know, tangible action steps toward manifesting that. So that's kind of, I like to give people at least that foundational. There's lots of nuanced differences and there's lots of overlap too. And
Absolutely.
even as I just described, you know, working with clients with depression, I had shared with you the other day, you know, one of the telltale signs that I look for to know whether or not a client is more amenable to coaching versus counseling is I'm looking at their level of functionality. So if a client is not sleeping well, not eating well, they're not going to work or not taking care of their kids in the same quality manner, if they are not functioning at least on a minimal level in their life, coaching is not going to be a good fit for them. They need to go back and probably unpack again some of those things and sometimes it requires even medication, you know, sometimes it even transcends, you know, talk therapy. It may require some additional pharmaceutical support. So for me, a telltale sign as to whether or not a client is amenable for coaching, like I said, is their ability to function and go about their daily activities. Now, is it perfect? No. I mean, I have clients who will take a lot of days off work because they have a hard time keeping it going on a regular basis, and that's fine, or, you know, in terms of them being amenable to work with me. But if a client is exhibiting multiple symptoms that show that they really lack capacity to just pull it together, even in the minimalist of ways, then I'll refer out. Another telltale sign for me
drop in real quick, allow me.
Absolutely.
I think, you know, I think it's really important that you said, you know, you've got to first do some healing before you move on to the coach. Because in some ways it feels like if people are prematurely going to the coach before they've done that healing, it can actually exacerbate some of the symptoms, right? Because now I'm feeling even worse about myself. I can't do these things that are being asked of me. And I think sometimes because there's so much stigma around seeing a counselor, going to, you know, therapy, that it's more attractive to say, I have a coach, right? And that may just be an 100%. Ego thing, but it's important for you to be honest with yourself. So yeah, like you said, if that impairment is stretching into multiple areas, you've got to deal with that healing first, because you're not going to be able to get the results that you want out of the coaching. So I love that you pointed that out.
Absolutely right. I had a consult last week, and that completely described the client. Like, she's telling me, you know, things that she's experienced and what's problematic right now. And I'm all the while thinking she needs a therapist. And she's like, no, but I really want to work with you because I like your style and this, that, and the other. And it was really in that vein of, it feels more socially appropriate to say that I'm working with a coach than to say that I'm working with a psychotherapist. I mean, that it was plain as day to me. But I just kind of let her go through her process, and, you know, as gently as I could, I redirected her back to what I thought would be a better suit for her. So 100% agree with that. Another telltale sign for me as to whether or not I'll take on a client that is struggling with any kind of extended bouts of sadness is I'm looking for whether or not the experience, as I mentioned, is tied to a particular stressor. So is this something that they just chronically experience often and all the time? Or is this triggered by the loss or a transition? You know, did they lose their job? Did they lose a loved one? You know, are they just ready to just kind of break free of this, you know, restricted life that they've been living that's not their own, you know, living according to somebody else's values or principles or intentions for them. And they're just wanting to like break out of that and, you know, be themselves truly, you know? So I'm always looking for, is it tied to something particular, a particular stressor? Because as I view stress, and you probably agree with this, stress is really a function of the mind. You know, it's an illusion of the mind very often, right?
So true.
Stress is a mental construct that we create. Yes, there are things that happen physically in our environment, but what we define as being stressful is really the value assessment in our mind. And so thereby, if you look at things differently, like Wayne Dyer says, you know, if you look at, what does he say? If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change, you know? So depending on the extent to which they are struggling with a particular stressor, that'll determine whether or not I take them on or refer them out. If it's, again, chronic, pervasive, and, you know, really unmarked by anything in particular, then I'll like, maybe you want to go to a therapist and, you know, start looking at things and diving deeper into those feelings. Another telltale sign, I'm trying to keep track of myself at that time, is, as I mentioned, well, I kind of mentioned it. So I look for whether or not it's tied to a particular stressor, because then my work with them becomes about helping them to redefine their life moving forward, right? So a lot of clients, particularly clients who are going through a major transition, so again, loss of any kind, whether it's employment or a person, people have to redefine their new normal. And so oftentimes clients will come to me for coaching because they just need a plan now. They need like, and not even just a plan, they need a vision. They have to now re-envision, reimagine their lives for the first time. And sometimes folks really struggle with that. It's like, even if they're able to manage the sadness, there's still this uncertainty and lack of clarity. Okay, but what am I going to get up and do tomorrow? Or how I'm going to add new meaning to my life now if I'm not doing this job that I've had all this time? Or, you know, how do I now establish my new life when I've lost the love of my life? You know, what does that look like? Where do I even begin with that? I don't even know what I want, because that's all I ever wanted, you know? So that for me is really the large bulk of my clients who have experienced depression, is folks who have gone through transition and now redefining. So, and I love that, you know, I love working with those folks, because it's like almost like helping people become born again. You know, it's like when you have to kind of start from scratch to rebuild yourself, it's like it's a blank canvas, you know? And so coaching people to kind of explore themselves in all of these nuanced ways in which they're not able to alone, because they've only looked at themselves in one way. Like, I love that. I really love that. So, yeah, so those are kind of some of my telltale signs to how I determine whether or not I'd work with a client. Let's see, I feel like I've been talking a lot. I want to, before I forget, I'm going to plug your Core Love in the description box, so then people have the link to be able to go to check out more about that particular program. And I know you said it's particularly for Black women. I would assume it's also kind of some universal principles to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And we're going to break this up and do this as a two-part. So we're going to wrap this session up, and then we're going to come back for part 2, where we talk more about actual strategies for managing depression. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into what you were saying about some of the cultural differences, because
definitely.
Right? Because even as you were describing, you know, the kind of textbook definition or the ways in which you define depression, that looks different culturally. You know,
absolutely, 100%.
Right. So I want to dive into that, and I can speak to that personally, because I may be getting sleep, I might be eating, you know, I might be doing a lot of the minimal things, but I know still deep down inside, I feel low. I might still be operating at a high level, because there's a certain thing called functional depression, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to dive into that when we come back, but I so thank you for being here, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. Those of you who are listening, make sure you come back and check out part 2, as again, we'll dive into particular strategies that you can use or try out. I never like to submit to any one size fits all for anybody, but that's what this channel is about offering alternatives and possible solutions, resolutions. And at the end of the day, we'll give our contact information out. So if you discover that even after we've offered some more strategies that you really feel like you need one-to-one support, in the description boxes of these posts, you'll be able to find our contact information and or at least some resources to how to follow up on your own. Because I know you can't take on everybody that listens to this, and I can't take on everybody that listens to this. So I'll make sure that I have a link to where people can, find more local services and that kind of thing. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So hang tight. We're going to come right back.